How are we?
Right.
Last leg, come on.
Okay.
Dig deep, that's it now. So, sit back, relax. We're going to give you the nice session, all right, in terms of communication. That's what we're all about. So, oh God, I've got that so loud. My levels, sorry, I think I must be shouting. So, obviously, we've listened to an enormous amount of information. My head's still buzzing still, and so, of course, we've got to distill all of that information, find a little place for it in our knowledge bank, if you've got any more space. But I guess really, in reality, these conversations are in a safe space of professional, like-minded people. So I've got my back to you, Miss Guilfoyle. So sorry. Oh, sorry. You'll forgive me for that. Thank you. Don't want to get in trouble. And you, Barbara. But of course, we have to remember that we have other members of the public who are busy being doctors, lawyers, teachers, refuse collectors, and they don't work in our industry and we don't work in theirs. But one thing that we do all do as people on the planet is we do traverse through landscape. And whether that's anything from doing the school run, going to work, or whether we're out there climbing a mountain. That's one thing that we all do, and that's why I know we're passionate about it. So, of course, it's very difficult for us in this room to think that not everyone is passionate about landscape and environment as we are, because obviously we do it as our job. So, just a couple of things before I get on to our lovely panel. So, just to remind ourselves that communication is the transmission or exchanging of information by speaking, writing, or using some other medium. But what I say is that good communication is that the message is received and understood with clarity and purpose. And the result that we want, hopefully, to come out of communication is better relationships, positive influence, and hopefully to create change. So we've got our three panellists here, a lovely panellists, who have been communicating within their own work and within the professional industry, but also as well touching on the public as well. And they all have a goal of reaching a wider audience. So I think it's much easier if you can each introduce yourselves and explain how your work reaches the public. So maybe we'll start with you, Rebecca, on this.
Sure. I think my favorite way that my work reaches the public is through designing and decorating and helping living spaces to flourish and be healthy for people where they live, in order to really create vibrant and living spaces, not necessarily parks and gardens that people have to travel to, but those that really make their existing lives more gorgeous. That's my favorite. After that, I really like to teach in all the various ways of teaching. And then I don't think I enjoy the process of writing, but I certainly feel compelled to do it. And so I do write. And after that, in the category of things that I don't enjoy but still do, would be big lectures and giving TED Talks.
So well done.
And then talking to my phone like a teenager and making dorky videos for the internet, because I feel like it's helpful as a way of teaching and sharing information, but it's certainly a slog.
Yeah, just pushing past yourself. And yourself, Ashley?
So my main role is head gardener at Horatio's Garden, and so I communicate every day with patients who have spinal injuries, and they're using the garden as a place for restoration. Talking to patients, and I do one-on-one garden therapy sessions, so I teach as well during those sessions. And also do a bit of media, Gardener's Question Time, try and give information via that, and a bit of writing and stuff in Gardener's World Mag. So that's probably my main communication techniques.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah?
So obviously I've got the podcast, and I actually head up a charity that does horticultural therapy, so I do interact with people occasionally, although I try and avoid it. And I do get asked to do talks occasionally, but again, that a little bit like Rebecca, I find that, well, personally quite painful. But yes, the podcast is the main way that I reach the public, because although I suspect that a lot of my listeners are not the general public and they're not kind of amateur gardeners, I do reach them because all of you kind of people listen, and then you disseminate that information out to your clients and to the people that you work with. So that's how I think I reach the public.
Yeah, but I like your honesty, Sarah, because I think it's fair to say that, you know, people often think that if anyone's down here, oh, you must love communication, or you must love people. And a lot of people don't love people. But they don't. And I think that's fair to say, that a lot of times I hear people say, oh, if it only wasn't for the client. You know, but the good thing about that, and hopefully that's what, you know, we're going to talk, and if there's time we'll obviously have some questions and a little bit of chat, because I do like people, and for those people that know me, I like a chat. I was a chatterbox at school, which is not, you know, always great on your school report, but obviously in the world of communication it's quite good. But I think it's really important that we have this blend of pushing oneself past yourself to still get messaging out. So I think that's commendable, really. And just a couple of things just to sort of share that, I mean, please don't fact check this, because obviously it was Dr. Google. But there's about 1.3 billion photographs that are shared on Instagram every day. 347 billion emails are sent around the globe every day. There are 18,000 different newspapers in the world. Then there was the books, the magazines, the symposiums like this. There's a lot of information out there. So if we're trying to communicate, we've got to think about the fact that we've got to push past all of this extra noise that's going on, and not just in our world. So of course, with this frustration that we get with our clients and our beloved public, they're going through a lot. So let's be all a bit kind about that. So, okay, so sort of kick off with our first sort of question. So, and this is just open, whoever wants to just jump in and answer. So Darryl showed us the World Economic Forum graph. Obviously, we're all horrified to see that that the green dots were relatively small, but it was an economic graph. So, of course, I guess we would be quite small. If it was our graph, we'd be centre stage. So, what do you think are some of the barriers of communication as to why the environment is not taken seriously?
I just want to say that if you are trying to feed your children, if you're trying to work 3 jobs, if you're trying to pay your rent and struggling, you are not going to be thinking about the state of the soil or how your general environment looks. You're literally trying to survive. So until we can lift people out of survival mode and make this country fairer and the wider world, then it's going to be a real uphill battle to get people to care about the environment. Having said that, there's amazing things we can do at grassroots, but I guess we'll get onto that in the next section. Yeah. But yeah, I just want to say another barrier is diversity, and having a diverse range of people in horticulture. As an industry, we're quite far behind other industries. So that's really important to me, to encourage diversity and show, you can't be what you can't see. Did Michelle Obama say that, I think? So yeah, and that's really true. When I started out, there wasn't people that looked like me in horticulture, really. I didn't see them. I mean, they were there, but they weren't shown in mass media. So that's really important for me, and that's part of my reason why I love to communicate, because I hope that I can inspire people, hopefully in the way that I would have liked to have been inspired. Yeah. So those are big barriers to me, I think.
No, that's great. And anybody else, Rebecca? Or?
That was so well said, Ashley. And I think that, as someone who works in public parks, they are very often the place where the unmet needs of society are made visible, right? Like if there's no housing, people live there. If there's no jobs, people sell things there. If there's no toilets, we all know what happens. And I think that as a result of that, sometimes gardeners can have this strain of misanthropy, right? They're we all know gardeners who are kind of like cat ladies, but for plants, and like they want to keep people away from their gardens. And in public parks, it's very serious. You know, there's kind of like a warfare going on with the public sometimes. And I think that the opposite strategy is really the goal, which is inviting people in to live their lives in those spaces. Make space for kids to pick flowers, you know, advocate certainly for all of those resources, but build those spaces for people to live their entire lives. I'm really guided by this old phrase from the 1920s of bread and roses, which refers to the fact that people need the basics of existence. They need food, they need shelter, they need healthcare, et cetera. But they also deserve beauty as a matter of rights, really. And so I've always seen my role as being the person to provide that in that context. And so I think that while we go about solving all of those big things, it's also very critical to put forward this idea of public gardens, of gardens in general, of beauty in general, as also a very necessary element in people's lives that they really have a right to, and it's just as important, as critical as anything else.
Yeah. No, it is. It's very important. And I think that hopefully we don't see too many "keep off the grass" signs. I actually went to buy one in an antique fair the other day. It was about £200 actually. So obviously, hopefully they're getting rarer. But it is, as you say, that those communications are not always verbal in terms of barriers. They can also be signage, quite literally, can't they, in terms of stopping people from feeling that they can be invited to the party, as we like to say. Okay, so I'm just wondering then, in your work or the interactions that you're having or trying to have to communicate and influence what needs to be done in gardens and the environment, who do you think's missing from the conversation?
Well, yeah, my kind of knee-jerk reaction to that is like everyone that's not in this room. But then I kind of thought about it, and I thought, actually, everybody that needs to be here is here and on that camera right now, because there's enough kind of power and resources and passion for just the people that are here listening today to make absolute sea changes. So, you know, the right people are here. What we can't do is have this kind of as a dead end, this event. We need to make sure that people come away and actually start taking action and start doing it like tomorrow, today. Yeah.
And Ashley?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, you know, we often go round and round in circles and talk about the same things over and over again. So it's having that action. I was wondering, like, how many people are from maybe community gardens and grassroots gardens here? So, yeah, there's a few, but not a massive amount. So maybe that's, you know, those are the gardens that are doing real work in the communities. And, you know, maybe we can invite more of those people in and invite the communities themselves in to see what's going on and hear all these amazing resources that we have here.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it seems like gardening is this basic human impulse, right? That most cultures have a method of modifying their environment to make it beautiful or productive or what have you. And that not everybody can garden, but certainly most cultures have that in their practices. And, you know, the horticulture industry is this bubble, right? And we're often very focused on pulling people into this bubble. And I think one of the ways to move forward is to kind of open up that bubble in general. Rather than focus on getting other people and putting them in and getting the resources, et cetera, maybe democratize what we consider to be horticulture and recognize all of the other types of gardening that might not look like something that would be on a slide here, like John Little's wonderful slide of the woman baking. That to like recognize all the other ways that people are currently gardening, and to celebrate that as well.
No, absolutely. And I think that, you know, if I can throw my two pence in as well, I think that, yes, of course, you're absolutely right, Sarah, that you know, the whole point, hopefully, of these symposiums and all the talks and everything we go to is so that we go and spill that knowledge out. But I think that there are times, and if I'm honest, is when we're in here, I say here as in any of the conversations, and we're quite often throwing out comments to people that aren't in the room. So policymakers or developers or education people from government. And I think that, you know, to progress some of these conversations, because people don't know what we do, because they think we just create nice plants and nice, you know, little spaces, or the green stuff, is what I've also been told, you know, within certain conversations. So I think it would be quite interested, and Julia, I'm sort of looking at you, my love, over the flowers, but maybe that's something for the next symposium. Is there a way that we can actually have a speaker? I know that when we had Lovely Way last year, having somebody from town planning, just that slight juxtapose, so that the questions can be asked to them, because often we throw it out, and of course people in the room are already converted. So the questions that I'm asking the panel is also questions to ask yourself. This is because, you know, who's missing from your conversations, and why are they not there, and how do you get them there? Okay. So we often get frustrated, don't we, with the public or our clients for not fostering our ideas. So I'm just interested to know what you do to convey your ethos and your methods, or your interests, and what do you think maybe the industry needs to do? How do you go about getting your ideas across to people?
Yeah.
Do you want to go?
I'll go for it.
Sure. I like to tell stories. I think it's the most effective way to convey information for me. And my favorite method of doing that is through pollination ecology specifically. To teach people, like there's very specific what we call pollination syndromes for different pollinators. Like fly-pollinated plants are often brown, and I'm sure, as you know.
I didn't, so thanks for telling me.
It's amazing,
Don't
right?
assume.
It depends on how different organisms see and what they want out of the flowers, but you can get to a point pretty easily with just like a half an hour of paying attention where you can learn to look at a flower and understand what it is communicating, right? And so that's my absolute favorite thing to share with people, because it helps them understand or flowers as living organisms with desires and behaviors, and it kind of clicks something in their head where they can suddenly give them a level of respect and personhood even that they didn't have before. And so I think that that's my favorite method for sure.
The narrative, the storytelling,
Yep.
which I like as well. Sarah?
Well, I mean, I realised after a short garden design career that I wasn't very good at communicating with clients, for definite. And so my answer to that was to just lock myself in a room and record my voice and chuck it out into the ether. And then I gradually convinced other people to appear with me as well. But I do sometimes teach, and a really important message for me is that what other people use as an effective form of communication may not necessarily be your preferred way, and you can take any form of communication and make it your own. Maybe you communicate via music, maybe you can do visuals, you can do words, you can, it's not, you're not going to be good at everything, but find that thing that you are good at and harness it and use that, I think, to spread your message, because that's really quite powerful.
Yeah. And obviously with your work, Ashley, how does it work? Obviously, your methods and ethos, and you're in amongst people and all day and everything. How does that work for you?
Yeah, I'd say like a massive part of my job is talking to people and describing plants. And during therapy sessions, I try to show people what you call like an awe moment. So something you might see that day that really inspires someone. And teaching people. So I've had patients who don't have gardens. A lot of the patients are from London. They live in flats, and so I had a gentleman who's like over 50. He's never sown a seed before. So just showing someone that simple process, and then a few weeks later they germinate, and he was so proud of it. He took pictures and sent them to his wife. And doing something like that will inspire someone to then look in their wider environment and say, oh look, this is germinating, or or maybe grow something on a windowsill. That's my hope, that people take that. So that's how I try to influence people, is to show them how to do it and empower them to do it themselves.
But also as well, sort of because you have private clients as well as working for Horatio. So how, when you're with your private client, the frustrating private client that wants to use the slug pellets or whatever it is, how do you go about?
So in Horatio's, I've kind of got captive attention in, like when I do private work, then I have to give forward a brief, and say, this is why we're doing this is the benefits it's going to give you, and sometimes you have to look at it in monetary value and say, actually, it's going to cost you less, it'll be less maintenance, and it will benefit the wildlife. So, that's kind of like a two-pronged attack.
Yeah, well, I think the sort of take out from that is the fact that, and especially as you've said, Sarah, you have to find your medium, don't you? You have to find what works for you, and it is that thing. I think people sort of forget that communication, I think, is like 7% verbal. The rest of it is body language or cues, and part of communication is listening, actually, which obviously you've had to do a lot of over the last couple of days. So I think that there is that invitation, isn't there, to kind of find the right way to communicate, but do something. I'm just going to read something which I think it was just after lockdown, and as you do, you find yourself on random little sites and things, and I was looking at the climate change committee, because they had something like a 450-page document. So the Climate Change Committee are they're part of government, but they have to advise government on what we should be doing to obviously combat the climate change crisis. They're quite feisty. I quite like the people on that committee, actually, so that's quite good. But they had like a 450-page document or a 45-minute YouTube. Guess what I did? Anyway, so but within that, they talked about the fact that, of course, because with climate change, there's obviously a huge amount of things that have to change, and we talk about obviously all of the oil people and the this, that, and the other. But part of it was about behavioural change and public engagement, which obviously in my ears went up immediately as to what that would be. And this is just one of the key findings. So this is specifically talking about climate change, but I thought, well, actually, it kind of gave me hope that government will have been advised to talk to people. So if the public are to become engaged with the climate challenge, and contribute to achieving net zero emissions, then the wider policy context will also need to be supportive. New compelling narratives will be needed to inspire and mobilise mainstream participation in solutions, adoption of technologies and change in behaviours. So I quite like the fact that of this chart that they had, X amount's got to be business, etc., and X amount's got to be government, but there was 16% left of societal behavioural change, and we can play a huge part in that. So of course, immediately I rang up the telly lot saying we need to do stuff, and they said no, that's not interesting enough, Arit. So I was like, okay, so sorry, it's not entertainment. Anyway, so how do we feel then that we can build bridges and break the, pardon the pun, grass ceiling? I had to get that in. Or the echo chambers that we kind of do sometimes surround ourselves, and how do we kind of push that reach past just the people that we know and love, as it were?
I think it is just so incredibly important to give people real actions that they can take that have a real effect. And we can all get, I know I personally get just absolutely overwhelmed when I think about climate change and all of the various issues that we're dealing with today. And the actions that we're often given in response to that are things like voting or recycling, and don't feel very empowering to me, and I certainly don't see the results of my actions. And so with gardening and with ecological horticulture specifically, it's such a powerful way to make a difference, because not only you can plant a plant and you can see a butterfly come and use it to reproduce, right? There's this immediate and real effect that happens. And that's important for ecology, but it's also profound for the person who is making that change. I see it as kind of like a form of direct action, right? That they're creating the world that they want to live in. And it can lead to so many other actions beyond that. I think one of the best parts about doing a TED Talk was when I told that story about Pearly Everlasting and neglected to talk about all of the after effects. People have written to me, dozens upon dozens upon dozens of people have written to me about planting that plant and having butterflies come immediately to it. And the fact that they had that experience, that it's not just this watching a video, right? It's such a different relationship to life, really, to be a helper, to be someone who can, make real change.
Yeah, no, thank you. Anybody else?
I think it ties in a little bit to what Ashley said, and also what you said, Rebecca, which is kind of making it real, making it tangible to people. I think for me, there's so many things I could say, there's loads of different ways we could approach this, but something for me at the moment that's very much at the forefront of my mind and ticks a lot of boxes is the whole issue around food growing. So, food I think is important, and it kind of ties into the economic thing, the supply chain issues that we've kind of experienced in this country, health, culture, family, relationships. It ties in, to so many things. You can do it, gardening organically in a wildlife-friendly way. But I really feel like, for me, food is the thing that just brings everything together. It makes sense to people, and I think it's something that we really, really need to start focusing on for people as well.
Yeah, thank you.
I was thinking about a word that keeps coming up is gardeners as disruptors in the garden and bringing in new species and things, but can we become disruptors as a group and disrupt the system so that it becomes fairer? And something I was thinking about is like community gardening and guerrilla gardening, and hopefully that would start to build these communities and make us stronger all together, because when you're out gardening in the street or on a private job, you'll be surprised how many people stop and say, "Oh, what are you doing?" or "Oh, what's that plant?" And it starts a conversation, and then maybe you can encourage people to get involved. I would like in my next steps to really look at community gardening and how we can use that as a disruption to the system.
And the community gardening does make so much sense, doesn't it? Because it brings more people together in one space, and it's having that louder voice. Banging a drum with one person can be quite tiring and relentless, but if you've got lots of people, banging that drum and taking it in turns, and it overspills, doesn't it, as well? And so I think that's a really great way, and I think that it's thinking about strategies in terms of communication as well, I think is quite important. I think sometimes if we're designing, and especially when, what's that in my ear then? That noise, sorry, hearing things. But I think that there's that part which I would guess that a lot of times, can we have a show of hands for people who work on their own as sole traders? So that's quite a few people. And so often we're challenged with, cost and time, and I wouldn't have time to do that, and that makes it quite difficult, because who's paying for this extra communication, who's paying for those photos, etc. But it's so imperative part of it, and I would say if you have to somehow cost that in, I think that's really fair to do that. I'm just thinking, because obviously I can chirp on, which is no good, and chuck in a few other bits. Shall we, because you guys have been sat quite a lot, not having a voice, should we have a microphone and have some communication? Anybody got any questions? Or if it's not a question, it could be something just to contribute, but I haven't got John's honker, so I can't honk you out. Sorry, John, you didn't give me the honker. Where are we going first? So I've got...
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Here?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. I'm in a really privileged position that I get to work with young people, with teenagers. And I'm also lucky that we've got a little tiny pot of money to engage a lot of those teenagers with growing things, gardening. I work at a big college, and we don't do any horticulture courses at all. It's in a city, and a lot of the students that I work with, they're like Ashley said, they are people that are living in survival mode, and that's kind of been a lot of their lives. And I mean, my question is, I have to find ways with kind of really limited resources to get these young people, these teenagers, thinking about horticulture, thinking about ecology, thinking about biodiversity. Have you got any good suggestions for drawing them in, making them interested?
Anybody?
I mean, I'm thinking about when I grew up, because I grew up in a council flat, we didn't have a garden, and it was actually a lady downstairs that would let me come down and play in the garden, and it was just that ability to be able to play and build things with logs and look for bugs and sow seeds, and she used to get me to collect seeds. So I think it's about having that space to run around and be a bit wild and enjoy that whole that we don't get to do so much anymore in cities and urban spaces. And I guess that could be like explorative, it could be using crafts. Sorry, I don't have any like specific activities, but maybe...
Well, just to add on to that with the crafts, unless you have something.
No, go.
Well, it's just that we did a project, or we are still doing a project at a school, so it's a secondary school. And of course, everyone's a bit awkward, aren't they, at secondary school? Talk. So where's the PlayStation? That's all I want to get onto. But saying that, and I just thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. But what we just did, first of all, because I think it's been mentioned before, people don't know what they want, but they do know what they don't like, if you know what I mean. So just starting with pictures and images of landscapes. And it was interesting. We had a mixture of, you know, the springy chicken, nice, or, you know, a proper sort of log playground or whatever, you know, a playhouse, whatever. And first of all, I just started to warm up the group by just sort of putting aside the pictures that they didn't like. And interestingly, they all did go for the more natural landscapes that we showed them and plants and things. And then a little bit more exploration. And then we had them making just models using leaves and stuff, and what if you could have anything you want, what would it be? And we just had these amazing models done, very rudimentary, but it didn't matter because it started to convey a communication from them, and then you're able to kind of then maybe take it on from there. Well, actually, then let's do that seed planting. So, because of course, I think, as you said, Ashley, that not everybody starts off with that magical experience of being young. Weeding was my introduction to gardening when I was young. So you have to think about just the fact that not everybody gets that same exposure as we have.
I was going to say, like Sarah said, like growing food is really important. And being able to eat something is so satisfying. And if you can grow something quite unusual, like wasabi rocket or an unusual type of mint or something like that, that's really engaging for kids.
I also think that making sure to show them the wonders and the amazing things that are currently in the environment around them already, as opposed to making gardens or gardening in general about, you know, these kind of going someplace else, looking at this beautiful designed plants from all over the world. You know, when my son was younger and he was in school, he would come home and he would do projects about elephants and tigers, and I was like, there are butterflies and squirrels, and you know, there's so many animals that you could be learning. And I went into his class and like did a whole program on the animals and that were just like right around their classroom, because that's their lived experience. And so I think just prioritizing the beauty and the wonder that is already there as well.
Great. We've got 2 minutes left, unless you all want to stay for a little bit more. So maybe one or two more questions.
Can you hear me? Hello? Oh, no, I guess not. I was just thinking about the topic of communicating, and that we're not always communicating to ourselves as an industry. And looking at the Beth Chatto Education Trust and wondering, and I've thought this is the third symposium I've been at, how we can go out into the community spaces within their climates and landscapes, and whether, I don't know, be people in this room, or we can subscribe to a database where we can put ourselves forward to actually reach out to the village, the town, the city that you live in. And I know this is probably like going to make people cringe, but I just keep thinking of the WI as a format, or the gardening groups, you know, the local, but sort of bringing it sort of into the 21st century with all the issues that we're talking about. Because I work on my own, and sometimes I'm lucky to have really good tuned-in clients who want to do beneficial gardens, but so often, you know, unless you've got a group of people behind you, or you can have one person that's really got the knowledge, and then you can get the community together to sort of help one another out, because often it's the people that have the money that can do this. And I just think so many people in this room have just got such valuable knowledge and passion and information, and it's like, I just wonder how we can take this out to community and towns and cities and not just be sitting in this room. Because I love coming to these, but I just think I'm going to go away and you're all going to be gone.
Well, no, we're all here still.
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
AI. We're all still here.
You are,
Don't worry, we're all behind you. Well, our time is up. We're going to answer this question, anybody?
Oh, I was just going to say, I do think that going back to the sort of local level is really important, and I've tried to embed myself into my local community, and they've dragged me out of retirement, and I'm going to help them with the biodiversity plan for the village, you know, in terms of designing the village. But you do, and when you look, you'll find that there are other people, like-minded people and resources within your local community, and yeah, you will need to just get out there, I think, and make that happen. But yeah, that's a brilliant idea, I think.
So thank you for that. So I know Julia's lurking, bless her. We had a chat afterwards, and we just had a couple of few summary points, just might help. The first thing is don't assume people know things. Oh, you must know that, because that's the biggest danger then, because assume people don't know things, and if they do, then great, but if not, we've missed a gap. Create that communication or engagement strategy. What's your goal? What is it that you want to be able to do? And then find your own way. I love Sarah's honesty about just not wanting to be front of house, and that's absolutely fine. That's brilliant. Collaborate is so important. So to your point, I remember knocking on this girl's door, liking how she planted something, and she was a garden designer by chance, and now she's my best mate. So we collaborate on things. So just collaboration is key. And just remember that people have tipping points. There's only so far that people want to be able to go on certain things. So being dogmatic about your idea isn't always the way. You have to come round the other side and work out how you might be able to take them with you. So we just hope that helps a little bit.
Hello? Oh, I've got it. I'm on. Thank you so much, Arit, and the whole panel. That was fantastic. So we're winding up the event now, but we've got a couple of minutes for John, who's going to talk a little bit more about his garden panel. But just before then, just to let you know, the garden's going to be open till about 8 o'clock tonight. So if you wanted to go over there, you're very welcome. The gardens are open tomorrow as well, and with your wristbands you can get in there and do the talks if you've booked in for the talks. And the other thing was just about that last comment. We've got a Facebook group that we set up from the last symposium, and I think we've been posting things to it. Is that right, Leanne? Yep. So that might be a method of communication for people, and it's owned by all of us, the symposium.
Okay, so I'll be really, really quick. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Julia, thank you to Chateau, and what an amazing day. I mean, is it? And there isn't a symposium or a conference like this, is there, in the UK? This is the best one, by far. And I say this one has been the most mad and incredible mix. It's been fantastic. So thank you, Julia. And thank you, Julia, for also giving a space for us to talk about gardeners. Where does that happen in other conferences and symposiums? Very, very unusual, and we're really thankful for that. And just the last thing I meant to say, obviously, when we had our spot, was to say we've just set up a not-for-profits company called Care Not Capital, and we're intending on hopefully either giving free training to everything other than straight horticulture, or we're really hoping to raise enough money to pay gardeners to come and get trained, so they don't lose their money on the day. And we're also hoping on the back of that to then fund gardeners to go into community groups, pay them properly, go into community groups and share all the shit that's in their head. give that to the community groups. You know what I mean? Take a creative, good gardener, pay them well, put them into the community, and see what happens. They're not going there to dig holes. They're going there to share everything they've got in their head. And I think that could be useful. So that's the little thing we're setting up. So if anyone wants to contact that, and also follow on this conversation about gardeners, which there was a real vibe about you wanting to do that, then maybe at the moment, maybe just message me on my Instagram account, and then eventually we're going to set the Care for Capital thing up as a forum for this, hopefully. So thank you all so much for listening to us all for all this time.
Thank you, John. Hello? Hello? Okay. Thank you all for sticking with us through a very long day. We've bombarded you with a lot of information again. You know, it's been a lot to take in, so thanks for sticking with us. And I'm just going to quickly wrap up with just a few sort of notes I made throughout the day. I mean, if you cast your minds right back to the beginning of the day, it seems such a long time ago. But Dan shared with us the exciting developments he's doing at Beth Chatto Gardens and Nursery, and how that's a really important part of taking Beth Chatto's legacy into the future. And so were all the discussions and conversations we've had today. One of the things that cropped up quite a lot was language. You know, that was really important. That was key to Sally's panel discussion. And Philip said, we're gardening with ideas, you know, language, ideas, and getting beyond the verbal as well. So thinking about all these different ways that we can kind of communicate. And of course, communication was that last fantastic session with Arit, and coming up with those practical strategies at the end is really important. That was great. Thank you, Arit. Joanne's panel showed that artists, you know, art is another form of communication, and they're thinking along the same lines as us. We should be working with them, we should be communicating with them, we should be collaborating. We need to work with other disciplines. This whole situation we find ourselves in is bigger than just one profession. John and Benny's panel also obviously talked about the ways that we can do that, you know, using people, about the importance of gardeners, about how they're essential to communication as well, how they're essential to communities, to social ecosystems. Michael said, traditional horticulture provides something, but we need a new culture. And I think we saw that. We saw that in Rebecca's ecological horticulture, where she's bringing plants, pollinators, and people together with a sense of beauty, getting out there, communicating in public spaces. And I think Owen's question about how we do that, what is the balance between control and participation? That's the crux of it. That's what we've been discussing. And there's been a lot of different approaches to that. If we think about the conversation between John and Benedict, that was one approach. If we think about what Richard Mabey was saying about his accidental form of gardening and gardening with the intimacy of a ladybird, these are different approaches. Norbert's was somewhere in between, working with spontaneous plants in organized ways or partly organized ways in urban situations. The thing is, there's no right or wrong. There's no silver bullet. These are all contextual approaches. We need to be sort of thinking about that. I talked about where everything is in flux, so there is no right or wrong. We need to get beyond binaries. We need to embrace contradictions. We need to experiment. We need to think about spectrums and complexity. So I hope we've given you a lot to think about in that respect. And if you can join us tomorrow, thank you. That would be great. If you can't, thank you very much for coming.